Hello everyone, this is part 11 of What If Naruto Was the Blue Uchiha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
6:06 a.m. Southwestern beach of Land of the Sea. Blue checked his pockets and hummed, bringing out a roll of rue from his front right and leafing out 2 notes, handing them to a little girl wrapped in bandages as she warily dropped 2 fresh, recently caught catfishes at his feet on the sandy beach. She hastily stored her well-earned, well-deserved 1,000 rue into her own pocket and silently watched as the blind man squatted down to the catfishes, screwing his lips to the side, feeling the fish with the tips of his index and middle fingers, bobbing his head slowly. "Looks good, kid," he commented, looking at her from his low position with a slight smile. "I knew I could count on you." Isaribi frowned, wondering how the man could tell with the bandages covering his eyes. "You don't look like I did good." She waved her cynical concern away. "I've got a lot on my mind, don't mind me." "If you say so." Orochimaru observed the interaction, seated on a flat rock, then she turned her face to the sea, washing up onto the shore rhythmically and retreating at a steady pace, leaving behind a few confused crabs though retrieving those crustaceans once the water flowed a bit further up the shores of the beach. She was wearing the same skin as when she was in hidden saltwater. The mother and son duo were a few yards away from the encroaching water. The underworld didn't have his cloak on, garbed in his dark clothing, red gloves and white bandages wrapped around his black sandaled feet as well as over his unseeing white eyes, and the Sannin was dressed in her usual clothes, only tying her raven black dreadlocks into a short ponytail. The man-fish hybrid girl flicked her eyes up to the unspeaking snake sage, clenching her fist slowly, and her eyes darted back to Naruto as he rose up. "Isaribi," he said, diverting her attention back to him. "We'll need some more." "How many more?" 2 fishes for 2 people already seemed plenty, though she wasn't aware of the combined appetite of the 3 people that would partake in them. He held up his right hand. 5 more. She was taken aback by his request and he added, "I'll still be paying 500 rue per catfish." Her young mind couldn't fully fathom how much money she was going to make that day, more money she had ever had in her whole life combined. She lifted her hands and counted with her fingers, murmuring under her breath as she did the math, as the master of the crows watched with a gradually tickled smile. "I hope that's not too much to ask. I know how hard it is to catch fish." "I'll do it," she snapped, withdrawing when she realized that it was this man that intended to hire her services and he could very well take back his money and pay some other person from the country to catch fresh fish. Isaribi's eyes glimmered with eagerness, jogging to the sea and shouting, "I'll be right back." She dove into the water and the only clue on which direction she went was an almost sonic boom of water thudding partly onto the beach and a zipping, blurring line of the half-fish girl swimming into the open water. Naruto chuckled and jabbed his thumb over his shoulder, facing his mother. "Nice kid. A bit guarded but I don't blame her." The people of the Land of the Sea detested her. They saw her unfortunate existence as bad luck and calamity. Isaribi was also a very clever girl, so clever that she had spotted when Blue and Orochimaru wander onto the beach and ran over to them, knowing full well that they weren't from the town and thus wouldn't be disgusted from seeing her. The girl's bandages hid most of her fish scales and her gills and, raptly observing the man had his eyes covered by bandages. She purposely pushed down the bile that surged up her gut at the sight of the snake sage, purposely not looking at her in case she lost her composure, and asked Blue if he would like her to catch him some fresh fish. He agreed, spontaneously deciding to grill them on the beach. She deliberately called a price lower than that sold in the market, even though she was actually diving into the water, nabbing the catfish and bringing them back to land there and then, and the Uchiha man agreed again, this time with a shrug. Orochimaru crossed her legs and sat back, placing her hands flat on the rock to stabilize her, and her son sat down with a huff, exhaling from his mouth and facing the water as if he too was watching the ocean. Blue was used to his mother changing faces and complexions ever since she defected Konoha, as morbid as that sounded. It was to hide her identity and extend the longevity of her existence by accumulating the remaining life force of the host with hers, she said. She wasn't so keen on taking the skin of a child because then she would keep the appearance of that child for however long the body lasted, without growing. There was also the added perk of Orochimaru claiming and absorbing the bloodline of the host once she wore their skin into her own. Like now, the dark-skinned, dreadlock-wearing Lady Orochimaru presently wore was a member of Iwa's Explosion Corps, a capable Tokubutsu Junin that constantly had explosive clay on her person. The total years her life was presently extended to was a good 200 years or so, and her absorbed Kekai Genkai was almost as extensive, though finding and overpowering a bloodline user was a difficult affair on its own. Her present skin was testament of that. Naruto was comforted in knowing that the face Orochimaru had first approached him with was her own. The snake lady was sadistic, bloodthirsty and power-hungry, he wasn't denying that, but her drive to conquer the intellectual and physical world had reduced exponentially the moment they reconnected all those years ago, stepping back to give her son room to make his own name. He leaned forward and placed his forearms on his knees, lacing his fingers. The dark-skinned Sanon's golden-yellow eyes trailed to his contemplative form, rolling her tongue in her mouth as she too searched for the right words to start their conversation. This was weird. Blue and Orochimaru never faltered. Naruto decided to just go for it, and he opened his mouth. Yugao told me that you threatened her. The mother grit her teeth and returned her gaze to the water, nodding once. I did. Her answer didn't seem to make Blue happy. He unlaced his fingers and clenched his hands till his knuckles popped, keeping his forearms on his knees and his blind eyes facing the ocean. He spoke and his words were deceptively calm. Why? She's not good for you, Naruto. She said pointedly, and the man laughed humorlessly, shaking his head and turning his face down. The woman, irritated by his reaction, sat forward and hissed. She is poison, Naruto. Her golden eyes blazed with emotion. That genjutsu-using girl, Tsunad's apprentice, the lava user from Kiri, the girl from the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, her the snake lady snarled, further provoked by Blue not looking back at her, instead frowning at the sand, his expression hardened. And let's not forget that Uzumaki princess. They are all poison, Naruto. Every single one of them. Your precious Yugito is no different. Blue asked. How are they poison? They don't value you, Naruto. Ha. The black-blonde Uchiha snorted. Yes. The dreadlocks-wearing sage insisted. You're a means to an end for some or a trophy for others, something to make themselves look better and to make everyone around jealous. She grabbed his shoulder roughly, but he still didn't lift his face to her, controlling his twisting expression. Have you forgotten that you're the only person on this planet that can snipe down a target from over 800 kilometers away? Have you forgotten the revolutionary inventions you've made? Not just weapons, tractors, crop harvesters, energy-saving light bulbs, elevators, solar-powered security cameras, I can go on. She was speaking in a strong though quiet voice. Don't you know your own value as a shinobi? You're an Uchiha of the highest caliber and a person of refined specializations. Look at me, damn it, she spat, finally forcing him to face her, not deterred or unnerved by the dark shadows creeping over Blue's face. She jabbed her other pointer finger at his chest, at his heart, and then pointed at her own. You are my blood, my son. She repeated the motion, her tone becoming firmer. My son. She released his shoulder, breathing out and looking out into the open sea. I was fine allowing you to have your fun, traveling, mixing and making a name for yourself. I was fine with that, Naruto. But it was that fame that contributed to your death. Minato's envy, Danzo vying for Blue's bloodline and Blue's so-called friends gradually fearing the air he breathed. The Yondaime was vying for all of the Uchiha sniper's blueprints almost as soon as he discovered the presence of the blind man's inventions inside the village and in places other than Fire Country, valuable inventions that had been released under an alias and without cost. Blue had done so to alleviate the suffering of people when the war ended. It wasn't an understatement to say that the inventor had sketchbooks and notepads of schematics he was yet to invent, and Minato wanted them almost as much as he wanted Blue's prized long and mid-range weapons, Crystalline and the twins. Naruto's conscience was selective at best, though he was a kind person. Then there were the people that looked up to the Blue sniper. I'm happy you are more infamous than me. Orochimaru muttered, promising. I am. Fame comes at a price. You need to be warier of the people you surround yourself with and especially of the women you hang out with. Is that why you never settled down? Naruto said calmly, betraying his dark mood. You were paranoid. That's why I'm still alive. Do I look dead to you? He shot back. Because of who? She fired, snapping at him. I didn't ask. Don't give me that. She exhaled hotly, shouting. Back then, I didn't want the one thing I hold dear in this whole world to leave me, and I still don't. She shook her head. I know I was selfish in merging you with the Crow contract. I didn't learn my lesson and let the world witness how special you are. She narrowed her eyes. The one person I've ever loved died twice because of my mistake. Lesson learned. Blue rubbed the side of his temple, wincing. Don't try this dumb pity party move on me, Orochi. The dark-skinned woman frowned and crossed her arms, glaring at the sea. He snapped his fingers in front of her face and she snapped, almost biting him off with her lethally sharp teeth had he not snappishly pulled him away. And don't ruin the dynamic we have. The infamous scientist didn't speak, so Blue went on. Yes, you're my mother and you want to think you know what's best for me. It was her turn not to look at him, directing her steadily angered face at the innocent blue sea. But I'm not a kid. I'm my own person and from the life you gave me twice, I don't regret anything. He said it again. I regret nothing. He stood up, tucking his hands into the pockets as Isarabi leaped out of the water dragging a net of 8 catfishes with much effort. She had found the net underwater and she planned to see if she could convince him to buy more fish from her, more than how many he said he wanted. The proud Sannin's only son looked over his shoulder, at his silent mother. Whoever decides to hate me, it's on 'em, not me. Finally, for the first time since he had reconnected with the snake sage, he warned her. Never again get involved with my relationships. The shadow swarmed his face and killer intent ebbed from his being without direction, pointedly avoiding the little girl struggling to bring fish from the sea. The fact that he stood securely, with his posture leaning back and his hands in his pockets, didn't do much to alleviate the foreboding. The woman bared her teeth, displaying her dagger-like canines and her purple forked tongue, unhurriedly standing up as well, meeting his venomous, sightless glare. The blue Uchiha punctuated his threat once more with one final word. Never. His words marked Orochimaru's cold heart. He held up a finger when she made to interject, less than afraid that her own child would harm her. The woman ended up changing her next question, shelving the matter of him threatening her for later. So, what of Yugito? He shrugged. We'll have to see. Yugal. Not interested, she's too close. The Terumi. Haven't seen her in years. That Kiri swordswoman, what's her name? You mean Naga. Same as May. Tsunad's apprentice. He didn't answer, only gracing the pale woman with a creeping smirk. Kushina. He grinned. Let's talk about something else, Orochi. My apprentice, Kabuto, will make an excellent life partner for you. Naruto, she is perfectly docile to you and she is madly in love with you. I know. The man groaned uncomfortably at the reminder of one of the Iwa orphans he rescued during Daylight Sagittarius. The silver-haired budding scientist was what people would refer to as an overprotective yandere. He shivered. That's an entirely different can of worms. This isn't over, Naruto. Blue wondered about that. He could no longer die, not by any mortal, conventional means anyway. As far as he knew, only someone like him could either seal him away or whittle his existence down to a low ebb, and there weren't any. Oh, the Otsutsuki. They were close power-wise, dangerously so, but they were locked away in an entirely different dimension. The lady in the moon too, sealed into the celestial body of the night. Why was she so worried? He wasn't unaware of anything, he wasn't underestimating anyone and he was preparing accordingly. The catalyst that locked the Otsutsuki away in the adjacent dimension as well as the error that had sealed Kaguya Otsutsuki into the moon may come undone at any moment. The underworld waltzed to the half-fish girl, cutting the distance at an easy pace and beaming widely, looking impressed. Wow, Isarabi. That's definitely more than 5. She panted, wiping her brow of sweat from the effort of lugging the fairly large catfishes as near to him as possible. She was dripping water and she swallowed, breathing with her mouth to catch her breath. Have I, huff huff, have I got a deal for you, mister? The man smirked, pretending not to know what she was up to. Oh really? She nodded frantically, unintentionally throwing about water in her hair. Yes. The 11-year-old fish girl motioned to the 8 catfishes, saying, I'll throw in 3 more fishes for half the price. It's only because you've brought good business for me that I'm doing this. I've never done this before, you know. At least she's not lying about that, Blue thought laughingly, before he squatted down and placed his pointer and middle fingers on the net, freeing his chakra to seep in and check the condition of the fish. There was a shallow depression at the top of their heads, meaning she had cracked down a rock on their heads to kill them, doing so underwater. The man pursed his lips, hiding his pleased expression that the girl Orochimaru's former associate had mutated was living up to his expectations. He got up and dusted down his pants for sand, pushing his hands to her. "You've got a deal, kid." Her hand rushed to her mouth and the blue sniper was happy to sense her elation, albeit half suppressed. Isaribi took his hands with both of her own, shaking it excitedly. "Thanks, mister." "No problem." His other hand fished out the money roll and he flicked his fingers, handing the girl her money. "You're free to stay, I'm thinking of grilling them." "I don't think that's a good idea. With peppers, onions, lemons." The defensive girl teetered uncertainly, unsure of whether or not to trust the man that had paid her so much money for fishing for him. "I might even have another paying job for you." Noting her sharp revulsion from the change in the movement of her chakra, the man cringed at his phrasing. "Nothing perverted, I swear." "Will she be staying?" Isaribi questioned, pointing at the unspeaking snake lady, and the woman narrowed her eyes at her, not in the mood to humor anyone. "Yes. Burr, 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 burr." Blue took out his flip phone and answered Yugito's call. There was a quick buzzing conversation, then Blue snapped the phone closed and said, "Scratch that, there will be a paying job." Amaki, Orochimaru former associate, was the cause of Isaribi's misfortune. He disappeared years ago. Until Blue assigned Yugito to track him down. It took the Kumo Kunoiki all morning and afternoon, but she knew where he was hiding. Blue told the little girl and he hadn't even finished speaking before she agreed. They patiently waited until sunset, Blue, Yugito and Orochimaru, spending a good amount of the time grilling their fish on the beach, spicing it with ingredients and condiments Yugito had purchased from the morning fish market, masterfully reflecting the salmon's dark glow of the Nibi Jinchuriki. When the time came, they moved out. Same day, 6:07 a.m. Yugao and Kurianai's apartment. Okami Lunar Apartment Complex. Hiru's and Sarutobi Street. Konohagakure no Sato. A ruffled 12-year-old boy rose up from his sleeping place, the living room couch, and blearily blinked, simpering at being woken up by his internal clock when the room was still mostly devoid of light. The light of the rising sun beamed sparsely through the closed curtains, allowing him to see a bit clearly without having to activate his dujutsu. He spared a glance at the area around the television and exhaled when he saw two of his most closest friends curled up in their respective sleeping bags, snoring without a care in the world. One of the 12-year-old Uchihas turned to their other side, facing him, and he saw his coal-black orbs vaguely reflecting the dim daylight oozing into the living room. Shisui chuckled tiredly and ran a hand through his hair, swinging his feet off the couch and yawning into the back of his hand as Itachi, the only other child awake at this time, sat up from his sleeping bag with a weeping groan. He underestimated how sleep-deprived he was and toppled onto his right side, onto Izumi, and the girl yelped in alarm, very nearly ripping her sleeping bag to hold a kunai up to Itachi's neck and holding herself when she realized where she was. "Come on, Itachi," she moaned, shoving him away and falling onto her back, closing her eyes. "Not again." She didn't quite like Shisui's tittering laughter, hiding his amusement behind his hands. The girl, from her position on her back, pulled her right arm up and feigned a throw when there was no weapon in her grasp. Shisui fell for it and ducked behind a measly pillow, knowing full well that good shinobi weapons would tear through the wool pillows like a red-hot knife through malformed butter. Izumi giggled and turned to her side, now fully encased her sleeping bag, looking at Itachi with a half-lidded gaze. Blue's nephew was also lying on his back, halfway out of his sleeping bag. Her friend didn't sleep much. It worried her. It worried them, her and Shisui. Normally, he slept for 3 hours at a time at night, and that was when his uncle was around to wear him down to bed. Itachi could barely function during the day with only having sporadic 1 hour of sleep spread out over a space of 6 hours. The boy said he couldn't sleep just because. The blind sniper's only nephew rubbed his eyes and looked at her, mumbling. "Sorry, Zumi." She smirked, curling her knees under her chin and wrapping her arms around her legs. "Morning, Scratchy." Shisui ran a hand through his hair, standing up and stretching backwards far enough for him to hear the pleasant creaking sounds of his body loosening up. He started folding his blanket and arranging the couch pillows, fluffing them accordingly and hoping that Kurianai and Yugao didn't notice the drool spot on a pillow he turned over. He spoke idly. "I told you to have the couch," he shrugged carelessly. "But do you listen to me?" "No." "Good morning, shit soup." Itachi drawled, rolling up his sleeping bag and hiding his wide smile at the sleepily enraged way his male friend snapped at him. I hate that name. Stop calling me it. Aha. It's not funny. That's enough, Scratchy. Azumi tutted, still in the fetal position inside the calming warmth of her sleeping bag. The sniper's nephew huffed and lugged his bag into a storage room across from Yugao's bedroom, taking with him Shisui's blanket. The girl then spoke to her fuming best friend, Shisui. You know how he gets when he doesn't have enough sleep, Shisui. Bear with him, okay? The speedster breathed out, nudging his foot on the girl's curled form. I'm not mad. Cool. She yawned, glad that her perky guy friend wasn't taking Itachi too seriously. The boy with the thick eyelashes hummed and got up. If you don't get up, we'll be late for team assignments. His eyes followed Itachi as the boy stalked back into the room, throwing open the windows, letting the light flood in unhindered and unfiltered. Azumi hissed. Shisui snickered. Itachi grinned. The genjutsu prodigy came to the girl as she flipped onto her side, hiding from the light. Get up. No, she answered stubbornly. Itachi glanced at Shisui, and they both shared a look. The two boys squatted down to Azumi and began poking her head, repeating. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up. Ayargush. The girl rose up from her sleeping bag like a phoenix and grabbed Itachi by the front of his shirt and Shisui by the back of his collar as he made to bolt away. The girl's voice deepened angrily and the two boys scrambled futilely to escape her grasp. Let me sleep. Itachi leaped on the girl and Shisui turned around to do the same, tugging at her cheeks as she pulled his nose. Meanwhile Itachi's right foot was firmly planted in her side, tried to push away and uncurl her fist from his shirt. Kurenai strolled out of the kitchen, wearing her normal clothes under a white apron that bore cat whiskers on the abdomen. She barked. Hey, no rockhousing. The bow staff using girl let go of the illusion user and the speedster, and the two boys leaped away, keeping the distance. The red-eyed woman nodded curtly and walked back into the kitchen, calling. I'm making waffles. Shisui's ears quirked up. Waffles. Azumi stealthily rolled her sleeping bag and beamed him upside the head, bounding away with a mad cackle and fleeing into the apartment's only bathroom as the boy blazed over to her in random bursts of wind and chakra, very nearly grabbing her heels had she not slammed the door in his face. Not cool, Azumi. He banged on the door with his fists and placed his ears on the door, hearing the sound of the sink running and the girl's triumphant singing. Face me like a man, Azumi. Hey, I said no rockhousing. Kurenai bellowed from the kitchen and the Uchiha boy gulped, silently easing away from the door. Itachi looked at his male best friend with a bland, vacant expression as he sat down on a chair in the living room, though Shisui could detect the subtle flicker of mirth in the sleepy illusionist's eyes, scowling. Shut it. Azumi's in the bathroom, right? He said. Yes, Shisui replied, slumping into the couch he had spent the night on. You can go in after her. Itachi, I hope you don't mind bathing last. I don't mind, the boy answered, bringing out two shuriken and turning them over in his hands, examining them with his coal black eyes. Yugao had an impromptu mission last night from Lord Hokage. She wanted me to tell you she had applied to become a Junin sensei but she didn't know if would get assigned any of you three. Kurenai had not applied though she was hoping to somewhere down the line, when she thought she was ready to bestow her knowledge on willing minds. The Genjutsu mistress then remembered something else. Oh, an Itachi. Yes, Yugao said I should tell you that you should go to training ground 44, the Forest of Death. After team assignments. She personally didn't like the thought of a genin going anywhere near that death trap of a training ground but Yugao had assured her that the reason behind it was very important. Kurenai had to trust her, for the cat-loving swordswoman was the one Blue constantly entrusted the safety of his nephew, then and now. Just you, Itachi, she added, before Shisui could voice his concern. It's a message from your uncle. Yes, Kurenai was of the small group of people in the village that did not believe her former flame was dead. It just didn't make any sense. Like the people that refused to think the blue sniper was dead, she had fought beside him. It was during the course of those battles that they had casually fooled around, even though she was already in a relationship with Asuma. Blue had broken it off when he found out she was dating someone else, not wanting to be the reason a relationship broke apart. They were nice memories for her, ones she hid from her boyfriend. Her past feelings for the inventor might have influenced her perception of Minato against Blue. Sure. It still didn't make sense though. Orochimaru being Blue's mother didn't matter, he wasn't her. The person she knew was nothing like the infamous Snake Sannin. He was obliged to have his own secrets, so not telling anyone but Yugao about him going for therapy with Inoiki was none of her business, and Blue not publicizing his inventions was another thing she didn't mind. She blamed herself for falling for Minato's words, causing the Blue Uchiha to group her with their friends and distrust them all in their entirety. Though she wasn't privy to the communication network between Orochimaru and Yugao and Yugito, having no idea at all of either, her lips were sealed. I wasn't told why, but it's very important you come. Thanks, Auntie Kurianai. Azumi returned, refreshed and dressed in her shinobi uniform, allowing Shisui to head into the bathroom. The girl unsealed the expandable bow staff Kushina had gifted her last night and studied it, carefully sweeping her two Tomo Sharingan eyes over its length and breadth. She didn't much regard Itachi's presence, somehow knowing that he was already in his head. The boy sat back in his chair, wondering what to expect in the forest of death. Ooh. 3 hours later, Itachi stoically sulked his way to the forest of death. He didn't get to be in the same team as his friends, and even though it was understandable why 3 Uchiha kids didn't formally get teamed up, he didn't get why he had to be on the same team as a civilian boy that didn't even want to politely spare 2 words with him and a Nara girl that was more concerned with tinkering with her phone, a flip phone that she bragged had fast internet and that her parents had loaded up with enough credit to take her a whole year to finish. Apparently the girl was a prodigy of her clan's bloodline and the civilian boy was a whiz with maps, or something like that. Then there was his team sensei. His mother. Itachi didn't even want to know the kind of strings his mother pulled to get that position or why she pulled those strings. Did she get assigned to Team 2 by the Hokage to keep her eyes on him in case his uncle was somehow sending messages? He didn't know and he didn't care. Throughout their first meeting in Class 4C, a class that hadn't been used since the Third War, Mikoto informed them that there were unseen powers at play that were hell-bent on destroying the leaf and that, as genin, it was their duty to ward off direct and indirect danger to the village with all their might. Even if the danger rose up from within their family. Here she fixed her son with a long, hard look. Regret is for later, judgment is only for your conscience and no one else. Those were her cryptic words. If she was trying to justify why she turned her back on her own brother, her blood relative, in favor of a village that constantly looked at her and her clan with skeptical suspicion, then he wasn't buying it. Itachi encountered Mitarashi Anko at the grand entrance of the Forest of Death and the Snake Girl, about Blue's age, regarded him with a sweep of her eyes and a rigid grunt as her lips turned down. Then she put her hands into her beige overcoat, not minding how her mesh-covered torso was displaying a vague silhouette of her body, and shrugged, smirking widely. How is this the first time we're meeting? Itachi didn't answer for a moment, briefly looking over her shoulder. His answer was honest, delivered with his tiredly expressionless face. Uncle Blue didn't want me to be anywhere near you. The woman tipped her head back, chortling. Yugao too, for that matter. She righted herself, her lips stretched leeringly. I don't know why they're so worried though. Itachi only shrugged. She continued. This isn't a place for kids. Why are you here? Yugao left a message for me. She raised an eyebrow. Where? He pointed behind her, at the forest. In there. I've been here all morning. Stationed there to chase off any overambitious genin that thought they could take on the forest. There's no message in there. Not for you. Itachi saw the look in her eyes. He knew that look very well. She knew of the message but her duties trumped any other loyalties, like with Inoiki and Hisashi. In Anko's case, she had been painstakingly rebuilding the village's trust in her after her bid to defect with Orochimaru failed in a blaze of glory. She had already managed to gain a relatively high position in the torture interrogation department, rising to the rank of Tokubutsu Junin and being in the Fourth's confidence. She might have had a casual thing for Blue but she didn't want to lose all the progress she had made. The cameras and sensors at the front of the gate kept vigilant track of the 2 ninjas. Thankfully, neither of them had audio and their positions from the cameras prevented their lips from being read. The woman breathed out from her mouth and closed her eyes. I want to help. Believe me, I do. She stopped as the single, small earbud in her right ear buzzed. She placed her pointer and middle finger on it and tilted her head to the side, keeping her eyes on the Uchiha boy. She pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes. Yes, sir, I'll find them. Infiltrators in the Forest of Death. The 2 of them could see wisps of white mist creeping out from the bottom of the gate, sluggishly ebbing from the forest. The bags under Itachi's eyes deepened and he hummed. Anko pointed at him warningly. Get back into the village, Itachi. It's not safe here. The woman bent her knees ever so slightly and hopped up blurrily, landing neatly on a spike at the top of the massive gate with both of her feet. Her body then simply phased out of existence as she pelted into the misty forest. The white mist rose up close to the tops of the trees, thick and roiling, and only barely slipped out of the gate. Itachi looked around, expecting a few more shinobi to arrive and rush into the forest. He guessed he had half a minute at most until that happened, so he powered chakra to legs. The chakra shot from his core to the muscles of his thighs, striking the tenketsu of his knees and calves as it ended its journey at the balls of his feet. The boy wasn't so specialized to not leave a chakra imprint on the ground that couldn't be picked up by a sensor, but he did know how to channel his chakra into parts of his body to improve his abilities. He adjusted his backpack and lowered his body into a crouch, placing his hands on the ground and looking up at his target. The Uchiha boy then released the coils in his legs and burst upwards in a plume of chakra smoke, making a subtle springing sound as he took off. He soared over the defensive spikes of the fence, wincing as small crackles of electricity traced his back and landing with a hard crash on the other side on his hands and knees. Itachi looked back at the fence, spotting the subtle snaps and pops of electricity coating the fence both to ward off the animals from escaping and dissuading people from entering. It didn't seem to affect the snake girl though. The mist covered the fence from view and a patch of whiteness before him cleared, giving him an obvious route to follow. And follow he did, ignoring the tenderness of his knees and speeding headfirst into the thick of the fog and forest. He was led to a termite-eaten hut that looked to have formerly served as a sentry post sometime in the Shodime's era. Small trees, bushes and weeds sprouted freely from the small wooden building, crawling out from the door and two windows. The wall of mist thickened and, turning back, Itachi realized that the path he had taken was fully blocked from view by the silence of the mist. Silence. Itachi realized with a jolt that he hadn't once heard the chilling sound life in the deadly forest. Rather, it was a stark silence, not penetrated by the softly pattering feet of Anko blazing through the trees, spreading out her senses, or the other multitude of shinobi surging inside the gated forest, answering the purposeful alarm created by the invader. It wasn't hiding in plain sight, not really, it was close quarters diversion. The Uchiha boy looked up at the top of the rundown building and he took an involuntary half step back, failing to mask his surprise. Seated atop the building was someone wearing a chalk-white mask with a slashed-out Kiri symbol on the forehead. The person was wearing a sleeveless white and green vest with a grey Junin vest over it with a pair of black shinobi pants and light blue sandals. There was a camo pouch on their lower back and their frizzy blonde hair was carelessly cut over their shoulders, not falling over the mask and emphasizing the dark blue eyes glinting from the eye holes of the mask. One last feature on her were 5 tally marks on her upper left arm, tattooed to her skin with red ink. Her lean arms were crossed, flashing this without a care in the world. The person was also noticeably feminine, sitting on the building with her legs crossed and a long needle across her thighs. Nuibari, the needle sword of the 7 swords of the mist. She looked to have been sitting there all along and just arriving at the same time. The masked woman noiselessly observed her friend's nephew, allowing the creeping silence of the forest to permeate the air. She then tilted her head to the side and her blue orbs strayed downwards, to the bottom of the building, and someone marched out from the vacant door. The other newcomer was a stately man that stood at 5 foot 9 inches, a discernible height unlike the needle user stiffly sitting on the sentry unit, who soundlessly lifted her eyes from the man and returned it to the genjutsu prodigy. The man had a receding hairline with short tufts of black hair at the back, beady black eyes and a sharp nose, reminiscent of a hawk. He had a hard, pointed chin and a pair of large ears. He would have looked like an extremely strict teacher or a particularly ruthless banker. The unrelentingly tough-faced man was wearing a black suit with a perfectly ironed white button-up shirt inside, and a blue and black kimono thrown over his shoulders though open at the front, reaching his knees and not in any way hiding his polished black shoes. In the man's left hand was a fedora and his right was bent at his back, like a butler would to their master. Taking in the man's dressing, Itachi's eyes were then drawn to his weapons. On the left side of his hip was a sheathed katana with a gold handle with red lines crisscrossing the face as well as a square guard, and a bit under the katana was a shorter blade, that was also holstered, bearing the same designs as the katana. Those were the two weapons of a samurai, and the fact that this person was allowed to bear a katana and a wakizashi at the same time meant that they either held a high position in Iron Country or they were a master samurai. Samurai unwaveringly believed in their code, and the samurai of Iron Country were not allowed to bear a steel katana or a sharpened wakizashi until they reached a certain stage in their training. The lines on the suited samurai's face and the few silver streaks in his receding black hair hinted his age, just about entering his 60s. Itachi knew this because there had been a few lessons in the academy about Iron Country and their warriors. The samurai didn't bear any resemblance to a ronin, and that worried Itachi. A higher rank missing ninja and a certified samurai in the same place. What had he just walked into? Meanwhile, the Swordmaster's clones served as the ghostly diversions, corralling and drawing Leaf Shinobi from the original's true vicinity. Itachi looked around for an exit point and he didn't find any dependable route, not with the walls of thick mist rolling through the edges of the open space. The masked woman with the Nuibari scoffed. The samurai took a careful step forward and Itachi's eyes snapped to him. The suited samurai bowed slightly with his fedora placed on his chest, lowering his eyes as a sign for the boy to relax. He straightened up and placed his hat on his head, fixing it properly. His pointed face eased back somewhat and he said, "My name is Dan Nobunaga. I was the honored accountant of Master Naruto Uchiha and the overseer of Master Naruto's vast wealth." He brought out a scroll from somewhere behind him with the hand formally bent at his back, holding it up but not moving to Itachi to hand it to him. Instead, he continued, "I was tasked by Master Naruto 5 years ago, before he went missing, to pass ownership of his wealth onto you at least a week after you graduated from the academy." He held up a single finger. "On the condition that you found the treasure he left behind for you in his office." The boy stammered. Pass ownership of his wealth. Was that even possible? Itachi's uncle was loaded. The samurai raised an eyebrow, his hand still holding up the scroll, patiently waiting. "How do I know you're not imposters? For all I know, you're not who you say you are, and all you want is the one thing in this world my uncle left for me," he snapped, shuffling back and hunching up his bag, holding a strap with one hand and ready to blindly bolt into the forest, without direction and hoping for the best. The Nuibari holder cocked her head to the other side, not saying a word. "I need proof," Itachi demanded. Even though Yugao had asked he be there to receive a message from Blue, he didn't want to blindly believe in anyone. Blue would probably approve of his caution. His hand still outstretched with the average-sized scroll in it, the samurai cracked a brief smile. "What proof do you need, child? You tell me." The man rolled his tongue in his mouth, saying, "All right. The treasure master Naruto Uchiha wished for you to retrieve from his office before it was raided by the Yondaime Hokage was a map of his contacts and connections." He bobbed his head, recalling the name the Uchiha sniper had once called it and one Itachi would undoubtedly know. "The Blue Network, if you will." The boy grunted under his breath, admitting that the Blue Sniper did not throw that coded name around to just anybody. The man had confided in him the name he had dubbed his contacts and connections, and Itachi had summarily called the name stupid. Casting away that regrettable memory and turning his eyes to the woman sitting cross-legged on the abandoned sentry unit, he asked, "What of her? What's her deal?" "She is my guard. Master Naruto insisted I spare no expenses to ensure my safety on my journey into and out of Konoha. I decided against bringing an army and was subsequently directed by my Fire Country counterpart, Blue's former accountant Rom Fire Country, to employ her agreeably dependable skills." The muffled wails of agony from the forest were testament of the Kiri missing ninja's skill. Dan raised an eyebrow. "Is that enough for you?" "No." The boy shook his head, his eyes fearlessly on hers. She soundlessly placed her right hand on her right knee, fractionally tilting his head to the other side. She listened to him with the calmer air of someone that didn't deem him worth any aggressive effort. "What's your name?" The masked woman mentally chewed his question, licking her hidden lips before cryptically supplying. "Blue called me Naga." Her voice was tonelessly cold, but mentioning the name her friend had called her came with a noticeably brief flicker of emotion. Naga's relationship with Blue wasn't physical. It wasn't sexual. They had been assigned on a joint mission by their cages to retrieve the Kubakiri Boku, head cleaver sword, from its former wielder that had defected from Kiri to Kumo. The then young sniper had spent a good amount of the time during the mission nagging her about how her sword worked. Nuibari was an anomaly, he said. Unlike with the rest of the swords of the mist that had some measure of comprehension, the needle sword should not have been able to block what it could currently block, and the act of Naga sewing up a small assembly of hidden star shinobi bewildered him. Just the two of them. Like her, she had been enlisted into the ninja force at a young age. He was cautious, yes, but he also talked a lot. It would have been yet another obstacle to put behind her once the mission was over, and of course she contemplated killing him when all was said and done, though it was the mystic surrounding Blue's own enlistment that kept her interest piqued. He had a weapon that could take down multiple hostiles from several miles away, calling it crystalline. She wondered if a side mission of her was to collect his weapon in the name of Hidden Mist. Or he take hers, the head cleaver and the needle sword. By the time the mission ended, he did no such thing and asked that they keep in touch, that he wanted to have as many friends outside of Konoha as possible. At some point, meeting up after years of back and forth letters, she contemplated showing him her face. Maybe she was infatuated. She couldn't know. He had many friends he sent letters to, a gross understatement, though Naga couldn't help but feel that she and Blue shared something special, something only they had. He was. She cleared her throat quietly and brought her mind back to the present, repeating tonelessly. Blue called me Naga, Itachi. She shrugged her shoulders, admitting. I'd like to think we were close. There were many other women that wanted to think they were close to the Blue Uchiha, Naga knew, and she unabashedly added herself to the number. His disappearance affected her, and though the accountant hinted that the man was alive and well, she hoped he would one day contact her again, so they could talk. Blue was her friend, after all. I'm only here to watch the old man's back. Dan came forward, this time, and he extended his hand further. Your uncle's will. But. The Blue Uchiha's nephew stuttered, not wanting to collect the scroll. He refused to believe the man he looked up to was gone. But my uncle isn't dead. The man's quick smile came and went again, bending down and taking Itachi's left hand, placing the scroll in his palm. He wanted me to give this to you. He wants you to have all the necessary tools to take this world by storm. The prodigy was confused, and it wasn't because the man used present tense like the letter Orochimaru sent him, but on the last part of his statement. What? The iron accountant began explaining. Inside this document is a statement of everything your uncle owned. The boy didn't quite understand because, as he thought before, his uncle was loaded. The thought of a single, average-sized document holding everything his uncle once owned was not understandable. So he asked, shocked. Everything. Everything. The old samurai didn't pick up the wonderment lingering in the boy's mind, replying plainly and simply, indicating the unopened scroll in Itachi's possession. Lands, money, large corporations, small businesses, every stake your uncle had in minor hidden villages, estates and properties, he trailed, realizing that they won't get anywhere soon if he listed off everything. He could barely remember it all. So the iron accountant shortened it by saying these next words. All of Master Naruto's assets, as well as what liabilities he had. Except for the blueprints of his inventions, he willed it all to you. It's all in this. The Uchiha's hands trembled as he subconsciously felt the weight of the scroll increase tenfold. He was smarter than his age, truly and reputably, but at the moment he was too dazed to know any better. The old samurai laughed, a heavy sound that tumbled out of his lips. No, Master Itachi, he said, referring to the boy as his new client. That is merely a statement of your uncle's assets and liabilities. The physical items are safely stored in his account in Iron Country, his subsidiary accounts in Hidden Saltwater, Hidden Stone, Hidden Tree and Hidden Mountain, and the rest are closely managed by myself. The main account and the minor accounts Blue utilized to contain and spread his wealth were mind-boggling for Itachi. The first minor village, Saltwater, was regarded as a festival village, the second Stone was openly loyal to Iwa, and the third and fourth Tree and Mountain were so unknown they were almost invisible on the map. Maintaining those accounts, certainly, were great ways to hide money and stream portions of them to respective investments. He couldn't keep everything in one place. That was unwise and chancy. The question of how this one old man managed all of those accounts left the 12-year-old child's mind. The job of managing those smaller, more minor accounts was helpfully lifted off Dan's shoulder by the formerly Fire Country employed accountant, the one that used to manage Blue's Fire Country account. That accountant had relocated to Iron Country and traveled with his wife to the locations of those minor accounts when Dan was too busy with his other functions. It wasn't nearly as stressful as it sounded, for either of them. Working for Blue and now Itachi was honestly enjoyable. The dizzy boy asked. Then, all Master Naruto had, Master Itachi, is now yours. He willed his life to you. He dipped his head, speaking lowly. I am at your service. If you are in need of money, resources, advice or questions concerning your possessions, I will always be one phone call away. His right hand went to his back and came back, holding an unassuming flip phone. The plan on the phone renewed itself directly from the smaller account in Hidden Mountain, and the network provider was also based in the mountainous region. Ironically, Naruto didn't have any sort of stake in that particular telecommunication business. He just really enjoyed the service. The point was that the Iron Accountant had many avenues to supply the boy with whatever he needed. He had faithfully and served Blue, through thick and thin, safety and danger, and he was going to provide the same high level of service to the man's nephew. A samurai as old-fashioned as him and an accountant as professional as Dan was not going to turn his back on the man that trusted him to be accountable for his wealth. Blue was his only client, after all, and now Itachi was taking up the reins of ownership. Speaking of Itachi, the poor boy's prodigious mind was still finding it difficult to wrap his mind around this whole situation. He had woken up that day without any high expectations, get assigned a team, meet his team sensei and hang out with his friends later. He definitely didn't think he would suddenly become a multi-billionaire. Itachi thought, the only thing his uncle left for him was a map of his network of contacts and connections. Now, he cracked open the scroll a little with his shaking hands, looking at the top part of the normal-sized scroll. The document itself contained rows and columns of storage seals, and each individual seal held a different asset statement from different places, written with the same easy-to-understand language the accountant respectfully used with Blue. It started with a general account statement from the accumulation of wealth from the major and minor accounts, providing a heart palpitation-inducing sum total of the money saved in Itachi's account and his trust fund. Then there were documents written on the various investments, intended productivity or otherwise, and that the accountants were keeping the shareholders of massive corporations at bay the moment he notified them of the transfer of ownership from his first client to his second. Those shareholders still wanted to place a face to a name. The Iron Accountant was detailed. Though you will have access to the resources left to you, I was charged to limit you to your trust fund. He pointed a finger at a particular scroll. I assure you, the funds inside your trust fund will carry you until you are ready to have full access to the main account. Full access. The samurai teetered. Well, alongside training in your shinobi way, Master Naruto wished for you to be well versed in a good number of your investments. It was something he was unable to do but trusted you will find a way to accomplish. In simple words, Blue wanted his nephew to understand whatever was going on with his investments as well as better himself as a ninja. The boy could withdraw from his trust fund but was unable to take anything from the main account until he learned a fair bit about the investments his uncle left for him. The idea was to ease Itachi into his acquired wealth instead of drop him smack dab into affluence, leaving him spinning. I need some time. The man nodded, understanding. Of course. Take all the time you need. And he meant it. He would just continue what he had been doing for years, until Itachi felt he was ready to involve himself or call on him for help. My number is stored on the phone. The phone was keyed to Itachi's chakra alone, making it unable to function at all in the hands of anyone else, and the scroll bore a for authorized eyes-only seal, like Orochimaru's letter, turning the legible script into indiscernible jargons under the scrutiny of outside eyes. And that was if the letter didn't go up in flames soon after being handled. Can I? Itachi hesitated. Can I at least know that my uncle is okay? He is okay, Master Itachi. Dan Nobunaga reassured his client. Keep this quiet, please. Naga's head turned and her ears twitched. The samurai placed his hand on Itachi's shoulder, looking into the boy's eyes. You are exactly how your uncle described you. This, he flicked his eyes to the now rolled up scroll in Itachi's both of hands, is nothing for you. I would only hope you don't push yourself so hard. His eyes went to the bandage-wrapped hands the boy sported. I say this truthfully, there is no rush. Then why did Blue, Uncle Blue, he corrected in his mind. Give me everything now. I'm just a kid. I'm just 12. Because he trusts you. The bags under the child's eyes deepened and the old samurai wondered if Blue's decision to hand over his properties to a young child was a good idea. The man fumbled imperceptibly, asking, what do you want me to do to alleviate the weight of this trust from your shoulders? Itachi's answer was both immediate and predictable. even for the silent, masked observer seated on the sentry post. I want to see my uncle, he said firmly, grasping the scroll with both hands tight enough for it to crinkle. The samurai's lips straightened and he grunted with displeasure, standing upright and pursing his lips as his mind debated Itachi's words. I want to talk to him, or else I don't want this. He held the scroll out with both hands and the old accountant noticed the lack of hesitation or indecision in the boy's actions. The boy was older than he looked, so this choice held more gravity. There's no use of it for me if I can't at least talk with Blue Uncle Blue about it. Dan didn't seem to approve of this, frowning visibly. This is your uncle's will, Master Itachi. I've got nothing else to say. Fortunately for you, Master Naruto foresaw this. The boy smirked, suspecting that his last prodding had hit the right spot. I know. The accountant turned around, speaking deeply. Unfortunately for you, Master Itachi, and Master Naruto, I'm very much used to handling your insistent predictions. Was it an Uchiha trait? Given that both uncle and nephew had the clan's dojutsu. Dan Nobunaga found it annoying though, how Blue his client could almost easily read people. In Blue's case, the man had traveled the continent and met plenty of people, so he was exposed to a wide array of personalities, behaviors and characters. Understanding the mind of a person wasn't an issue. It was why Naruto had so many friends, the more loyal of which were apparently outside of Konoha. The sniper knew the conversation points to strike up or the manner of which he should carry himself around people that would entice them enough to bring himself into their inner thoughts. It was manipulative, definitely. No one was refuting that. But the Blue Uchiha's intentions were true. He wanted friends. Naga understood long ago that he might have used his skills on her and she had subsequently fallen further than friendship into the realms of loving affection for him, and the same could be for the rest of his friends around the continent, men and women alike. For that matter, Dan too. That wasn't a problem, not for her and not for many of the people he encountered on the road. In Itachi's case, it could be his prodigious ability to use genjutsus that keyed him into the minds and consciences of people. Maybe. Dan and Naga couldn't be sure. He was a smart kid, Blue told Dan so. He will contact you within the week, Master Itachi. Naga hopped down from the roof of the crumbling building, slinging her needle sword over her shoulders and perching her wrists on it, casually sauntering to them. My clones have been dispersed. Time's up. Dan nodded, speaking to Itachi over his shoulder. Expect Master Naruto's call any moment from tomorrow. I can be patient. Ooh. Kakashi threw a baleful look at Yugao's unconscious form, cradling the broken ribs of the right side of his torso, falling onto his right knee and wheezing for air. He definitely had a punctured lung. Tenzo wasn't so lucky. His back was slumped on a tree in the clearing Jiraiya had been killed in, missing his legs from over his knees. His whole right arm and the cat lover's sword was hilted deep in his gut, pinning him to the tree. The copy ninja wasn't sure how Yamato was still alive. Jiraiya's dead body laid where it had always been, his head burning with the blue's hellfire, right in the middle of the newly created chaos of the three Anbu ninjas' battle. Tall, warped trees swayed in the wind, spread about randomly in the glade, most of which were cleanly cut or slashed into ribbons. Kakashi lost 5 dogs to their first failed attempt at restraining and holding the purple-haired woman down, and Tenzo summoning trees didn't work much for someone as agile as the cat mask-wearing lady. It had taken Kakashi using his Mangekyo to bring her down. Hataki Autumn Storm, a botched, self-created Tsukuyomi alternative Kakashi had made to replace his inability to manifest the dreaded Uchiha Mangekyo illusion. He had pleaded for her to not resist. Begged her even. She put up a fight. Of course she would. Minato's order had been specific in his order. Lure her away from the village to the site the Toad Sag had been murdered in, lulling her to a false sense of safety induced by the Anbu mission given to their assembled team, and apprehend her to be used as bait for the blue sniper. Kakashi didn't want to do this. He didn't. He wasn't as eager to harm his Kuhai, unlike Yamato Tenzo. Killing Obito for his Sharingan and then later murdering Rin when she became too agitated to keep quiet about it had greatly sobered the copy ninja up. He didn't want to hurt his friends. He didn't. Tears streamed from his eyes, both of them, and the Mangekyo whirling in his right eye spiraled to a stop, devolving back into its 3-tomo base form. The silver-haired Junin groaned in pain, holding his throbbing side and wondering how he was going to be able to get all of them to the rendezvous point at the state he was currently in. Naruto, Kakashi whispered airily, falling onto his back heavily and closing his right eye. Sorrow cleared up from his face and his disinterested half-lidded left eye stared up at the blue sky peeking in from the rustling sway of the canopy of Makotan trees covering the previous twice-used battlefield. Look at all the trouble you've caused. Ooh. Sunset. Land of the sea. Blue pulled on his hunter ninja mask and hopped onto a speedboat, sitting by the engine. Yugito clambered onto the boat, sitting at the bow, and Orochimaru sat in the middle. The Kumo Kunoichi was wearing a black ski mask and dark clothing, different from the usual clothes she normally wore, and the snake lady had both her face exposed and clothed in her usual attire. Isaribi ran into the water and a low thud shortly shook the beach as she exploded into the depths of the water in one strong swim. Her presence lessened as she blazed underwater miles away from the beach, followed some yards behind by Blue and his two accomplices on their speedboat. Yugito's attention was ahead, at the massive cargo ship they were skimming the water towards, focused on their task and impatiently tapping her pointer finger on the butt of her sheathed katana. Meanwhile Orochimaru faced her son and yelled over the loud hum of the engine. Why not blow the ship up and resurrect the guy? The mask Blue wore, chalk white and mouthless with large red painted eye holes, turned to his mother. The bandages wrapped over his eyes and the mask covering his face managed to convey his faint smirk. If something is too easy to do, then it's likely not worth it. It'll save us time. She so desperately wanted to witness the carnage Blue was to bring at the end of his revenge escapade. What's the rush? The dark-skinned, golden-eyed woman replied. There's no rush. The point is to enjoy the ride, not speeding to the destination. Blue said sagely, and the woman frowned that she was being reprimanded so causally for her impatience. Besides, I want to make sure Minato's life is in complete shambles before I send him to hell. Minato's not just going to be sitting on his ass, Naruto. I'm aware. What if I don't know Yugao or Itachi get hit by the crossfire? And they will. There's a world of things I can do, Orochi. Yugao's already been attacked. He tapped the side of his head with the pointer finger of his free hand. The soul inside Minato read his memories. Orochimaru's eyes widened. Then, you don't want to help her. Trust me when I say this, Orochi. Yugao hasn't needed help for years. There was a distinct air of ease about him after that statement, one that carried lingering worry. The lights from the ship illuminated the water around it and Blue turned off the engine, allowing the momentum it had been running in to steadily take it closer, noticing that their presence hadn't yet been detected. Like with Kushina when Obito came for her tailed beast, Yugao will be fine. His smirk lifted higher ever so fractionally and he didn't say anything anymore, leaving that part of his plan in the dark. Yugito remained steady when the bow of the speedboat tapped against the larger boat. Blue made it a point to not jeopardize her shinobi career on the chance she was sighted with Orochimaru or him, so he pressed that she wore a ski mask and average clothing reminiscent to a burglar. Right on time, there was a big thump on the other side of the ship, strong enough to rock the massive cargo ship. Naruto went around Orochimaru and bent down, lacing his fingers together. Yugito placed her hands on his shoulders and her right foot on his hands, surging chakra to her legs and leaping up at the same time as Blue as he hefted her foot up, soaring over the edge of the cargo ship and landing with a muted knock. The swordswoman lowered her stance and yanked a kunai out of the pouch on her right hip, sending it into the back of a deckhand that was unfortunate enough to see her gain access to the ship. The man toppled forward as his spine was severed and he blacked out, slipping into the eternal abyss of death as his body fell into Yugito's ready hands, pulling him back into a partially darkened portion of the ship and covering his dead body with a tarp. Yugito cleaned the blood from her kunai on her calf, lowered to the ground, and then peered over the edge of the ship, sending a wave to the patiently waiting master of crows and the snake Sannin. The ship grumbled as Isaribi rammed into its side again. The ship's sirens wailed. The demon brothers leaped off the ship, balancing on the water with their chakra, and went after the child as she led him away, leaving only Zabuza on board with a cargo ship of panicking civilian sailors and wary hired mercenaries. The mercenaries trooped to Gato's lavish quarters, covering the door, the hallway and the entrance into the middle of the ship, allowing the Kubakiriboku-wielding missing ninja to rove his eyes over the water from the highest point on the ship. His eyes snapped to the place Blue, Orochimaru and Yugito had infiltrated, glaring with a grunt when he saw nobody there. The trio used the wavering cover of darkness to break into the engine room of the cargo ship. Blue stood by the door and flicked his hands to the left and then over his right shoulder. Orochimaru backtracked and went after Zabuza and Yugito followed him into the engine room. The Sannin was mainly to cause more noise to muffle their intentions, and the Kumo female Jinchuriki was to act as support in case they encountered opposition along the way. Their target wasn't the Kiri missing ninja or the corrupt owner of Gato Shipping Company. This whole operation could have been easier. Yes, it could have. But this way was more entertaining than simply melting the cargo ship and returning his target to life. Maybe on another day, he would want to operate faster and more laid back. The pair swiftly clambered up a ladder and Blue opened the hatch, blurring out and giving Yugito room to escape as well. Over here, a mercenary carrying a cumbersome-looking hammer yelled, waving his hand for his comrades to come quickly as soon as he sighted the two masked ninjas rise out from a hatch to the engine room. He was about to face them again and engage, but his head was split in half by Yugito's katana, from ear to ear, and his brain fell out with a wet slap onto the floor. Blue left her to her homicidal rampage. He found his target trying to sneak out of the sickbay. Amaki was a young-looking man with pale gray hair, tied into a small ponytail at the back and dot-like black eyes that struggled to recognize the masked man standing at the end of the hallway Gato's room was situated. He was wearing a long-sleeved purple dress shirt that was buttoned all the way up to his collar and a white doctor's coat. He was formerly an accomplice or Orochimaru for a short while, until he almost succeeded in experimenting on one of the Iwa children Blue had saved, for when the Snake Lady chased him out of Hidden Chill. He briefly continued to use his former benefactor's name to hold sway in the criminal underworld, until the Sannin in turn spread news that he was no longer associated with him. The protection he had gotten from being a friend of Konoha's deadliest missing ninja evaporated, and 3 major hidden villages, 3 major countries and 6 smaller countries stamped him as wanted, making nowhere safe for him to hide from his previous crimes as well as the crime of association with the wanted Snake Lady. You see, Orochimaru of the Sannin might have been wanted, but she was still an S-ranked kunoichi. Not many people were willing to go after her. Amaki, though, wasn't so skilled and thus was fresh meat for the continent's bounty hunters. He struck a deal with Gato, the best deal he could find, and the fat shipper would protect him from people coming after his bounty as long as he in turn worked as Gato's personal physician. That alone shouldn't have been enough to protect Amaki. And it wasn't. The man was a lab attendant at the time he fled from the Snake Lady, and now he had somehow made himself into a scientist. Seeing the masked, cloaked man that had rounded the corner, Amaki's first instinct was to flee. Blue's body dispersed into a murder of crows, twisting and warping through the hallway to Amaki in a flurry of black-winged birds, viciously cawing. The murder slammed into Amaki and a hand materialized from the blunt hit, circling his neck and cracking him into the wall. The blind sniper lifted Orochimaru's renegade former associate, Amaki, clear off the ground, and he said in simple words, "Minato's been sponsoring you. Who the hell are you?" Amaki grated between his teeth, less than comfortable from being held off the ground. The scientist grabbed the hand holding his neck, and gray-green fish scales crept over his arms and cheeks, moments from fully shapeshifting into a Kaima, the elevated version of what he had done to Isaribi, only for Blue to bounce his fist on his face, crushing his nose and forcing his transformation to recede abruptly. Blood rushed from his broken nose and the hands on Naruto's wrists flew to his nose. Ow. My nose. Ominous shadows loomed over Amaki and Blue's ill-omened mask darkened. I need you to tell me what you've been doing that Minato's been sponsoring. Quickly now, a crow perched on Blue's shoulder, swiveling its head to the right and looking at Amaki with a steadily revolving 3-tomo Sharingan. The underworld snapped his fingers in front of the dazed scientist's face, prompting him to accidentally meet the crow's hypnotic gaze. Places to be. Ooh. At that same time, somewhere in Zuki, deathly silence reigned in the obscure building. A pale-eyed crow wordlessly hopped into the cell of a purple-haired woman, and she woke up with a jolt, snapping her head from left to right and realizing that she was in a dimly lit cell in a less illuminated dungeon. The first thing the woman did was to check if anything on her body was amiss. There were deep cuts over her body across her torso and her shins, and they trickled with blood, reminiscent of her experience in Kakashi's custom Mangekyo illusion, and it prickled with each movement. Her wounds weren't healed, but aside from the cuts and soreness of her body, she was fine. The storage seals on her body were wiped off, empty of their former contents, and her hair was mussed up and disarrayed from hands being run through it, probably to check for seals and traps. She also didn't have her sword or her shinobi sandals, feeling her bare feet plod the cold stone ground as she made her way to the cell door. The crow with milky white eyes merely spectated as she regurgitated 2 long, blunt pins from her gut and subsequently began picking the lock. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.